calm seems to be holding steady after deadly fighting took place in Gaza over the weekend between Israel and Hamas. Israel had temporarily stopped the flow of aid to Palestinians in Gaza, but has since allowed it to resume.
We have a guest now with some perspective on all of this. We're joined by conservative political commentator Bethany Mandel, who's written extensively about Israel. Thanks for joining us, Bethany. Appreciate it. So given the volatility we know is the Mideast, were you surprised at all by the fighting that did break out over the weekend?
No, not at all. This has been the theme, honestly, for years in this region. When there is a ceasefire, Hamas violates it, and they're sort of thrown back into this cycle of violence. It's why when they were negotiating the phases of this most recent deal, that the Trump administration insisted on the return of all the remains of the living hostages, the remaining living hostages, and also all of the remains of other hostages who were murdered in captivity or who were taken on October 7th. They insisted on that in the first phase immediately because they knew that this would be the end results, that everything would sort of fall apart as it does when Hamas is involved, and they needed to get the hostages back.
And Bethany, what about the argument that Hamas was making, as far as we could tell, which was that these were rogue actors? Well, whoever launched the attack, it did not come from sort of headquarters. They were still respecting the ceasefire, but there are rogue actors who they've lost contact with. It sounds obviously quite chaotic. What do you think about that argument and whether or not that will scuttle everything?
I mean, you also have to keep in mind that they're not upholding other parts of the bargain, namely that they have not returned all of the remains of the hostages that they have possession of. There's still 16 hostage bodies that they're holding on to, two of whom are American citizens. And I think that is a real, trying to say this in a polite way, a real message to the Trump administration, how much they respect them. And I hope the Trump administration is listening to that message.
It's interesting because when you heard Benjamin Netanyahu give that speech at the Knesset, it didn't sound as though he were embracing peace or a ceasefire. He really was talking about the hostages coming home and President Trump. Were there a lot of suspicions initially right away that there wasn't really a deal here for peace, rather just a prisoner exchange?
Well, I just want to note that it wasn't a prisoner exchange. There was innocent Israeli hostages given for mass murderers. So it wasn't necessarily an exchange of like individuals.
Right.
But no one anticipated that this would last because it never has. One of the bodies that they're holding on to is Hadar Golden, who during a previous ceasefire 16 years ago, he was an IDF soldier. He was murdered by Hamas in the middle of a ceasefire, and his body was taken hostage. This is how Hamas operates. They're not willing, and they're not interested in laying down their arms. They're not interested in this conflict being concluded. This is how they operate. So it was a cause of celebration in Israel that the hostages were returned, but no one was anticipating an end of this conflict.
Before the ceasefire, we had reported about a poll from the Israel Democracy Institute that found nearly 1 in 2 Israelis wanted Benjamin Netanyahu to resign. Have you gotten any sense whether that sentiment has changed since last week?
No, I mean, it's a lot of the same dynamic that it is here. Half the country loves him and half the country doesn't love him. We have the same situation with our president. There's been a lot of anger, justifiable, and some not so justifiable, in my opinion, about how he has handled the war over the course of the last 2 years. But ultimately, he's a really polarizing figure, the same way Donald Trump is. He's basically their version of Donald Trump. He does good things, he does bad things, and he has plenty of critics.
Quickly before you go, how popular is President Trump there? I mean, the reports are that he's far more popular than Netanyahu.
It's insane. There was a really funny reel that went around Israeli and Jewish social media the other day where there was just going to be an explosion of babies named Donald, and that is absolutely true. He is the most popular person in Israel by far.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
Wild.
Bringing Donald, the name Donald back. I thought it had been retired in that generation, but no, it's going to come back. Bethany, thank you very much for giving us a reality check on.
That's
from
really
there.
interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Easily the most popular person in Israel. I haven't heard it put that way. I knew he was popular. I didn't know it was
Well, we
to
saw
that extreme.
in Hostages Square during some of the remarks when Trump's name came up, people were applauding and cheering. and not so much.
Prediction: they rename it Trump Square.